Hi, I'm Rachel, and at my sister's birthday, my own mother threw wine in my face because I wouldn't give her 100 grand and a new car. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing it wasn't just about money. It was about control, guilt, and a lifetime of being used by the very people who called it love. Ever been the backbone of a family that pretended you were the burden? Before we dive in, tell me, what time are you watching this and where from? Drop a comment below. You're not alone anymore. The restaurant was dimly lit, polished like a postcard, and painfully empty. Glassy laughter pinged around the edges of the private dining room, bouncing off walls that smelled of rose water and old wealth. I knew before I even stepped inside that this was going to be a performance, and I wasn't meant to be the star. I was the prop. My heels clicked against the marble, too loud in a room full of rehearsed warmth. Sarah, 32, sat at the center of it all, glowing in a fitted red dress, bathed in attention like it was sunlight. Margaret, my mother, 57, stood behind her, hands delicately placed on her shoulders as if crowning her the queen of dysfunction. And somewhere across the room, Ethan, 38, raised a glass to acknowledge my entrance, his smile hesitant. "Rachel," Sarah chirped, waving dramatically like she hadn't sent me a list of acceptable birthday gifts 3 weeks prior with a note that read 100K or a white Escalade would make up for everything. I smiled thinly, resisting the urge to check my phone. Instead, I hugged her because that's what good daughters and sisters do. They show up, they smile, they stay quiet. "You're late," Margaret said through a sharp grin, pressing a napkin into my hand like a peace offering. "Traffic?" Her tone made it sound like I'd been on vacation. "Court ran over," I replied calmly. "You know how mergers can be." She gave a half laugh. "That's right, the big shot lawyer, always working. Maybe you'll finally take a break and share some of that hard-earned fortune with your family." It wasn't even subtle anymore. We sat. I was placed at the far end of the table next to an empty seat. Symbolic, maybe, or just a power play. The wine flowed. The waiters hovered. Ethan tried to make small talk with Nathan, Sarah's on again, off again mistake of a husband. I stayed silent, observing. Halfway through the appetizer, Sarah clinked her glass with a spoon. 3 delicate taps. "I just want to say thank you to everyone who showed up tonight, especially those who didn't forget me." There it was. Margaret didn't even wait a beat. Some people show love through gifts. Others, well, they hoard their blessings like dragons sitting on gold. Laughter from nearly everyone except Ethan, whose eyes flicked toward me like a man slowly realizing he'd walked into a trap. "I'm sorry, are you referring to me?" I asked, tone level, eyes fixed on my plate. "Oh, honey," Sarah said, faking innocence with a saccharine smile. "You don't need to be so defensive." "I'm not defensive. I'm confused," I said, raising an eyebrow. "Are you implying I'm responsible for your birthday disappointment because I didn't give you 6 figures and a luxury car?" "Don't twist it," Margaret snapped. "You're the eldest. You make more than your father ever did. You think it's cute to pretend you don't owe us." "I owe you presents, not a paycheck," I replied steadily. "You didn't raise me to be a bank." That's when she stood. Everyone quieted, the silverware pausing midair like a choreographed freeze frame. She picked up her glass, Pinot Noir, the expensive kind, her favorite. She raised it toward me. "A toast," she said, voice velvet-coated venom. "To daughters who forget who bled for them." I didn't blink. She tossed the wine in my face. The cold soaked through my blouse instantly. Gasps rippled down the table. Sarah clapped. Actually clapped like it was the climax of a Broadway show. Ethan stood halfway, stunned. Nathan muttered, "Jesus." I blinked the wine out of my eyes, calmly picked up a napkin, and dabbed at my cheeks. My heart wasn't racing. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't humiliated. I was awake. They think this is it, I thought. The moment they finally break me. Margaret sat down with the smugness of a woman who thought she'd won. Sarah leaned into her shoulder like a toddler who just watched her mother defeat a villain in a cartoon. I straightened my back. I've argued billion-dollar lawsuits in rooms with men twice my age and half my respect. I've cross-examined fraudsters who sweat through Armani suits. And tonight, I realized I've been preparing for this table my whole life. Ethan reached for my hand. I pulled away, not from anger, but from precision. I reached into my clutch. Click. The flash drive was small, sleek, black. I placed it gently on the table, then stood and walked toward the fireplace-mounted screen, heels echoing across the polished floors like a countdown. "I wasn't going to do this tonight," I said, glancing back at them. "But since you're all here and you love a performance, why not give you something to remember?" Margaret's smile faltered for the first time. Sarah's wine glass lowered. I turned to the screen. I inserted the drive, and the screen blinked to life. I didn't wait to see their reactions. I walked out of that overpriced restaurant with wine still drying on my skin and judgment sizzling in the air behind me. The valet offered me a towel with pity in his eyes. I didn't take it. My car smelled like leather and lavender, the only space in my life untouched by their expectations. I sat behind the wheel, closed the door, and stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Hair damp, mascara streaked slightly beneath one eye, but otherwise composed, at least on the surface. That was always my talent, holding the pieces in place when they wanted to fall apart. The screen from the fireplace was still playing in my head. Margaret's smugness, Sarah's hand clap, the wine sliding down my collarbone like a final insult. And behind it all, that carefully orchestrated silence they always counted on from me. They thought they had silenced me, but silence comes with a price, and I had paid it in full. The drive home was a blur of headlights and late-night traffic. Seattle's skyline shimmered in the rearview as if the city was trying to look me in the eye. My phone buzzed once in the passenger seat. "Ethan." I didn't answer. Instead, I let my mind drift to 2 years ago, the first time I learned that in my family, generosity was just another currency they intended to devalue. Back then, I was doing well partner track at my firm. My face still appeared in top 40 under 40 newsletters. And in a rare moment of what I thought was affection, I bought my mother a Lexus. It was pearlescent white, brand new, with a big red bow I paid extra for because I thought she'd like the drama of it. She cried in the driveway, hands to her chest like she was receiving a medal. "This is too much," she said, even as she slid into the driver's seat with the glee of a teenager. I didn't know that 2 months later, the car would be re-registered under Sarah's name or that it would be used as loan collateral to cover Nathan's gambling debts. I only found out when I received a notice of repossession addressed to me. When I confronted her, Margaret shrugged like it was a clerical mix-up. Sarah needed stability. A car in her name builds credit. And Nathan's going through a rough patch. Don't be selfish. Selfish? That word stuck with me longer than the actual betrayal. It framed my boundaries as greed, my hesitation as cruelty. She said it like I was the problem for not wanting to finance someone else's dysfunction. I didn't argue. I nodded. I smiled. I sent the payment to clear the debt because that's what I'd been trained to do. Later, I convinced myself it was a one-time thing, an emotional misfire. But the pandemic would prove otherwise. During lockdown, I wired money monthly to my mother. She claimed she was sick, needed medicine, couldn't afford groceries. Nathan had lost everything. Sarah had given up so much. I didn't question it. Couldn't. Not then. I was buried in remote depositions and financial restructurings, trying to navigate clients through crisis. It made me feel good to send something home, like I was still tethered to something human. Until I saw the Instagram story. It was posted by a childhood neighbor I hadn't spoken to in years. A blurry video tagged at the Bellagio in Las Vegas. My mother and Nathan in the background, laughing over champagne at a blackjack table. No cane, no cough, just lies. When I called her, she didn't even apologize. "I raised you," she said, her voice calm. "Isn't that worth something?" That line broke something in me, not because of what she said, but how easily she said it. Like love had an invoice, like motherhood came with compound interest. I didn't scream. I didn't block her. I started saving everything. Bank statements, email receipts, Venmo screenshots, the casual comments Sarah made about mom's allowance. The way Nathan once joked about Rachel's lawyer money being the family bailout plan. I began storing them in a folder labeled Proof of Pattern. I stayed quiet. To the outside world, I was still the composed daughter, the one who smiled through champagne toasts and sent edible arrangements on holidays. But inside, the silence was curdling. I kept thinking about the night I gave her that Lexus, how I'd wrapped the keys in velvet, placed them in a tiny box, and whispered, "Thank you for everything." What a joke. The real gift had been my silence, my compliance. And they knew it. They expected it. They counted on it. The Lexus wasn't for her. It was an investment in her control. And I was done paying dividends. As I pulled into my driveway that night, I finally answered Ethan's text. I typed only 4 words. Asterisk, I think it's time. Asterisk, then I hit send. I stared at the message on my screen for several seconds before locking my phone and placing it face down on the kitchen counter. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Ethan had gone upstairs, giving me space. He knew me well enough by now not to ask if I was okay. I wasn't. I was aligned, focused, ready. I went to the sink and rinsed my hands under cool water, wine stains still faint on the cuffs of my blouse. The moment reminded me of another time, one I tried to push to the back of my memory, but now couldn't avoid. It had been 6 months ago, a sunny Saturday in early fall. Margaret had invited me to what she called a simple family brunch. Just a few ants, some scrambled eggs, light conversation. She made it sound casual, innocuous. It wasn't. I should have known something was off the moment I walked in and found all the women seated already, Sarah included, perched with exaggerated innocence, sipping from a mimosa. Margaret ushered me in like a guest of honor. I took my seat. Then came the show. You know, Aunt Jane, 60, started without so much as a hello. It's just hard watching the family drift apart when some of us are doing so well and others are struggling. I mean, Aunt Patricia, 55, added. You'd think with all those fancy degrees and court wins, there'd be a little more generosity at the table. Sarah didn't say a word. She just watched me, waiting. And then Margaret, with the theatrical pause only she could master, said it. We've done everything for her. And now she can't even help her sister get a leg up. The word we echoed. Suddenly, I wasn't facing my mother. I was facing a tribunal. I swallowed my orange juice to hide the bitterness building in my throat. The toast on my plate had gone cold. My appetite had long vanished. I looked at Sarah again, wondering if she'd chime in, defend me, say anything. She didn't. She doesn't even visit unless we guilt her into it, Aunt Patricia continued, too career-focused to care about family. I sat there, heat crawling up the back of my neck, my heart pounding like I was on trial, because in their eyes, I was. And my crime? Not paying for Sarah's grad school, not co-signing another car, not wiring money without asking where it went. I excused myself 15 minutes later with a tight smile and a headache excuse. Driving home that day, I turned off my phone. The silence was brutal but necessary. I couldn't stomach the fake apologies that would follow. I ended up pulling into the Target parking lot near Mercer Street, killing the engine without getting out. That's where the tears came. Not because they hurt me, but because I finally admitted it. I wasn't their daughter. I was their donation plan. Weeks passed. The brunch was never mentioned again. Margaret acted like it hadn't happened. Sarah sent me a meme about birth order roles in families, as if that could mend what she silently co-signed. And then Denise messaged me. Denise, the black sheep cousin everyone ignored unless they needed a baby shower photographer or someone to watch their dog last minute. She'd always stayed in the background, faded in every family photo, but now she was in my inbox. I think you should hear this, the message said. Attached was a voice recording. I hesitated before playing it. Margaret's voice came through first, clear and unmistakable. Rachel was made for this. She's the dependable one. She was born to support us. Then Sarah, laughing. That's why she's single-minded. God made her with a wallet instead of a heart. The room around me spun for a second, the oxygen thinner. I replayed it 3 times to be sure I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't. It was never about helping Sarah or a hard season or a down payment. It was never about need. It was about expectation. It was about what I owed them for being born. That night I stopped crying. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. I got to work. I backed up the recording to 2 external drives and uploaded it to a private cloud. Then, I ordered a second phone under a pseudonym and opened a new secure email account. From that point forward, everything they sent me went into digital storage. Every wire transfer they requested, every payment they tried to route through my name, every offhand joke, every email with urgent in the subject line. I wasn't just remembering anymore. I was archiving. I created a folder on my computer that night, named it exactly what I felt. In case they try to ruin me. I heard the sliding sound of a chair being pushed back before I even stepped out of the garage. The kitchen lights were still on, casting a low golden glow that spilled into the hall. My heels tapped against the hardwood as I set down my purse. Ethan was standing by the kitchen island, holding a single piece of paper. He didn't look angry. He looked still. Too still. "Did you authorize this $12,000 transfer to your mother's account last week?" His voice was level, but underneath, I heard the fracture. I walked closer, my eyes dropping to the bank statement in his hand. Our joint account, the one we used for household expenses. Nothing extravagant, just mortgage payments, utilities, groceries. It was the account we both agreed was off-limits for anything beyond the essentials. I didn't answer right away. My throat felt tight, not from guilt, but from inevitability. "I didn't authorize that," I finally said, voice low. His gaze didn't move. "Then how did it happen?" I sat down, the edge of the counter pressing into the backs of my knees. "She still has access," I said, barely louder than a whisper. "From years ago. I never closed it off. I thought if I left it there, she'd stop asking for more. Just use what was there and let it be." He was silent for a long moment. "I see." That was all he said. Not "how could you let this happen," not "you need to fix this," just "I see." And then something in his posture changed. He put the statement down carefully, like it might break, and walked around to sit across from me. "They used your generosity," he said. "But this is theft." I looked up at him. There was no doubt in his face anymore. No gentle suggestions about talking it through or giving them time to come around. "They've been bleeding you for years," he added. "And I let them because I thought I was staying out of it, but I wasn't. I was enabling it." His words landed with more grace than accusation. He wasn't angry at me. He was angry at the truth. I nodded slowly. "They didn't just steal money. They convinced me it was my duty to let them." He leaned forward. "We're cutting them off. All of them. No more calls. No more wiring money. No more access. This ends now." I stared at him. This man, my husband, who had always been diplomatic, even when I came home in tears, who played peacemaker every holiday, every tense brunch, every passive-aggressive group chat. Now, finally, he saw what I saw, and he wasn't trying to smooth it over anymore. I stood up, walked over to the side cabinet, and pulled out my laptop. "There's something I want to show you." We moved to the den. I opened the folder I had labeled months ago, in case they try to ruin me. Ethan watched without blinking as I clicked through receipts, digital transfers, screenshots, and audio files. I played the recording from Denise, the one with Margaret's voice calling me dependable, like it was a synonym for disposable. When it ended, he didn't speak right away. His jaw flexed, but his voice stayed measured. "They've been orchestrating this like a business," he finally said. "Like you were a walking trust fund." "I know." He turned to me fully, no hesitation in his eyes now. "So, what's the plan?" I felt a slow breath escape my chest. Relief, maybe, or something deeper. I wasn't alone anymore. Not in this. I opened a blank document, typed 3 words at the top. Contingency phase. Legal detachment. The next morning started quiet. Too quiet. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee when Ethan walked into the kitchen. Phone in hand, eyebrows raised. "Nathan messaged me," he said, swiping his thumb across the screen. "Wants to grab lunch. Just us, man to man." I stared at him over the rim of my mug. Did he say why? Just that he wants to clear the air before things get more complicated. My first instinct was to say no, to scream no, but instead, I nodded slowly. "Go. Hear him out." Ethan studied me, searching for hesitation. I kept my face unreadable. That afternoon, I waited, not nervously, but with a coiled readiness. I vacuumed the hallway twice, reorganized the pantry, cleared out my inbox. The truth was, I already knew what Nathan's move would be. He wasn't subtle. Never had been. That message wasn't about peace. It was about pressure. When Ethan returned home, he dropped his keys in the dish and took his time removing his coat. He didn't speak for several minutes, then finally said, "It was exactly what you thought." He sat at the edge of the couch, eyes narrowed. He opened with a joke. Then he ordered bourbon at lunch, even though it wasn't noon yet. Said he just wanted to talk man to man, like he was offering some kind of truce. I waited. "He told me you're being too sensitive, that Margaret's heart is in the right place, and this whole thing is just a misunderstanding blown out of proportion." I exhaled slowly, already knowing what was next. Then he said, Ethan paused, disgusted. I should have helped you see reason before this legal thing gets out of hand. Like I'm supposed to babysit your reactions. Like he thought I'd be easier to manipulate. Did you say anything? I asked. No. I just stared at him. That told me everything, but the next punch came faster than I anticipated. Later that night, I got a fraud alert email from my bank. I assumed it was a phishing scam until I noticed the last 4 digits of the card listed. It was a supplemental credit card, one I hadn't used in years, one I had given to Margaret back when I was still under the illusion that just one card couldn't hurt. I logged into the account. There it was, a $3,048 charge from a luxury boutique in downtown Seattle. Item description: designer handbag, limited edition, cashmere gray. I dialed the number immediately. Can you confirm the purchaser's name on that transaction? I asked the bank agent, keeping my tone calm. Certainly, ma'am. One moment. Yes, the authorized user on that card is listed as Sarah Bennett. Of course it was. I thanked her, ended the call, and stared at the screen. There was no remorse, no delay. They weren't panicking. They were doubling down. They thought I wouldn't act. I pulled the drawer open, grabbed the card, and without blinking, took the scissors to it. The sound of plastic snapping in half felt better than I expected. Then I went online and closed every lingering account with even a whiff of shared access. Old joint savings, emergency Venmo links, a brokerage fund I'd forgotten I once opened for Margaret in my 20s. Gone. All of it. That night, I sat at my desk and opened a fresh legal template. At the top, I typed family debt reclamation. This wasn't about just the money anymore. This was about restoring my name, my dignity, my voice. Every dollar they took without asking carried something far more valuable. My silence. And they'd finally overdraft that account. As I saved the file, my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen since the brunch ambush. Margaret. I didn't answer, but I read the message. Asterisk family dinner Sunday. Be there. We need to clear the air. Asterisk. I stepped out of the car and shut the door behind me with a soft, deliberate click. Ethan didn't move from the driver's seat. Our eyes met in the rearview mirror. He gave a small nod. I gave a smaller one back. The front porch light of my mother's house flickered, as if even it knew tonight was cursed. I adjusted the collar of my coat, pressed the flash drive deeper into my pocket, and walked up the path like I wasn't walking into a lion's den. Margaret opened the door with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. Rachel, she cooed, pulling me into one of her signature over-perfumed hugs. So glad you came. Sarah was already seated at the dining table, idly scrolling on her phone, refusing to look up. Nathan, standing behind the bar cart, raised his glass of wine toward me. Red or white? Neither, I said, removing my coat and hanging it on the same rack where I used to leave my school bag as a child. I'm not here to drink. We moved to the table. A roast sat untouched at the center, flanked by asparagus and potatoes that were probably cold. Nathan poured himself another glass of Merlot, the grin never leaving his face. I just want to say, before we eat, Margaret began in her best Sunday sermon tone, how grateful Sarah is that you helped her with her new home. My stomach turned. I blinked. Excuse me? Sarah's lips twitched, but she said nothing. Margaret pressed on, eyes wide with faux innocence. You know, the paperwork? She told me you co-signed. It meant so much to her. My voice didn't rise. I never co-signed anything. Nathan let out a fake chuckle. Oh, come on, Rachel. The family asset transfer form. You signed it back in June, remember? It's all tied together. I turned to him slowly. No, Nathan. I didn't sign anything, but I'd love to take a closer look at that form. The signature on it looks an awful lot like mine. Just a little too practiced. Sarah's chair scraped against the floor. Her voice cracked. Rachel, I've been struggling. You know that. I told you I was in a dark place, depressed for months. And that, I said, turning to face her, gives you the right to forge my name? To commit fraud under the guise of mental health. She flinched but didn't deny it. Margaret immediately stepped in. That's a harsh way to put it. You've always been the strong one, Rachel. It was just a little help. Sarah needed stability. A sister steps up. I've stepped up my whole life, I said, reaching into my bag. I placed the flash drive on the center of the table like a judge dropping a gavel. Alongside it, a neat folder, printed records of the house deed, bank statements, loan applications, voice memos. Denise's audio clip queued up on top. Nathan finally blinked. "You want to talk stability?" I said, standing up slowly. "Then let's stabilize the truth." I pointed to the folder. "Every name you signed in mine, every dollar you funneled, every time you used my silence as currency. It's all in there. You don't love me. You love what I gave you." Margaret reached for her wine like it was the only weapon left in her arsenal. "You better be careful, Rachel," she hissed, voice suddenly sharp. "We know things about you, too." The room felt like it exhaled when I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the flash drive. No one moved. No one breathed. It was the kind of tension you feel right before a courtroom verdict, where the weight of everything unspoken crashes in one breath. I walked to the media console, leaned down, and inserted the drive into the port under the flat screen. My hand didn't shake. "Not anymore. You wanted to clear the air, right?" I said, clicking through the folders on the TV. "Let's start with facts." The first file was labeled Simply Transfers. Sarah. I opened it. On screen appeared a PDF trail of wire transfers. $2,000 here, $5,000 there, each marked reimbursement for prescription expenses. But the pharmacy addresses were 2 designer outlets in Scottsdale. One receipt even included a loyalty bonus from Neiman Marcus. "What the hell is this?" Sarah snapped. I didn't turn to her. "Let's keep going." Next, a series of emails filled the screen, all from Sarah's address, begging for help with medical debt. In one, she attached a fake ER invoice, forgetting to remove the stock photo watermark in the header. The room began to stir. Nathan stood, moving toward the TV. "That's enough. This is completely inappropriate." I stepped in front of him. "Don't," I said softly but firmly. "Sit down, Nathan." He blinked. Something in my voice made him obey. The next file was labeled Nathan Offshore. It showed bank statements tied to a shell corporation routed through the Caymans, linked directly to his name. The header read, "Family Trust Disbursement Variance." I knew what that meant. Misuse of assets my father had left before his death. Funds meant for education or emergencies. Gone. Then came the audio. A grainy clip of Margaret's voice, unmistakably her, sneering through a laugh. "Rachel's guilt is the best investment I ever made. She can't say no. She never could." Sarah gasped. Ethan's voice broke the silence from the hallway. "You didn't just take money. You turned her into an ATM with a conscience." I looked over and met his eyes. He was holding the doorframe like he wanted to rip it off the hinges. I hadn't asked him to come in. He did that himself. Then the final video began. Denise's face filled the screen. "We all knew Rachel was the safety net," she said, voice even. "We watched them use her over and over, and we stayed quiet. I'm sorry for that." The screen faded to black. Sarah shoved her chair back, storming toward the hallway. "You recorded us? That's a violation of privacy. You violated trust," I said, my tone low. Repeatedly. Margaret was pale, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Then, like a bad high school play, she slumped sideways in her chair, moaning. "Oh, not this again," Ethan muttered, stepping inside. Nathan rushed over dramatically, tapping her cheek. "Mom, Mom." I leaned in, crossed my arms. "Margaret, if you're going to fake a fainting spell, at least close your eyes all the way." She straightened up like nothing had happened. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Turning your back on family, humiliating us." "No," I said, stepping back. "I'm ending a cycle." I opened my folder and pulled out 3 manila envelopes. I walked around the table, placing one in front of each of them: Margaret, Sarah, Nathan. "This is a formal declaration of legal separation, financial, residential, and personal. You've been served." Sarah's mascara-streaked face twisted. "You think this makes you a hero? You're just bitter cold." "No," I said. "I'm awake." Nathan stood. "You'll regret this, Rachel." I turned toward the door. "You'll regret underestimating me." I didn't slam the door. I didn't have to. My silence echoed louder than their rage. Asterisk link to next chapter. Asterisk. What I didn't know was that while I was walking out, the internet was already blowing up. The first thing I noticed was the silence. It wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the eerie kind, the kind that sits in your chest like a warning. I turned over in bed, Ethan still asleep beside me, and reached for my phone. 47 missed notifications. My heart didn't race. It sank. Somewhere deep in my bones, I already knew Denise had done it. The flash drive, its contents were out. Public. Viral. Her text said only, "I waited until after you left. You didn't deserve to fight this alone anymore." I tapped open my feed, and there it was. The headline from a local Seattle blog: "Elite family accused of exploiting daughter for years with receipts." Underneath, a video compilation. Voice clips, bank records, the dinner showdown, my calm delivery, Sarah's cries, Margaret's smirk, Nathan lunging toward the screen. And the comments. Thousands of them. "She's a hero for holding her ground. This is what emotional abuse looks like in real time. Hashtag guilt economy is trending." Finally, someone put it into words. My eyes glazed over, not from fatigue, but disbelief. For years, I thought the worst punishment was being ignored, but I never expected this kind of attention would feel freeing. Later that morning, I padded downstairs to the kitchen, where Ethan was already making coffee. He didn't say a word, just slid the phone toward me with CNN playing on silent. My mother's face, Sarah's face, the clip of me laying the evidence on the table. The words "family financial abuse scandal" scrolled across the bottom. I lowered the phone. "Is this real?" Ethan nodded slowly. "It's not just trending. It's unraveling." By noon, 2 of Margaret's charity boards had announced her temporary suspension pending internal review. Sarah had posted, then deleted, a long message about being misunderstood and manipulated into desperate decisions. An anonymous IRS contact sent me a brief email. Nathan's offshore holdings were under review. There was suspicion of asset misreporting. Asterisk, we may reach out for a statement. You won't be alone in this. Asterisk. I closed the laptop, stared into nothing. My entire life, I had been told to keep it in the family. Turns out, families like mine bank on that silence. Not anymore. That evening, I walked into what used to be my home office, now turned strategy HQ, and stared at a whiteboard filled with notes, case files, and post-it scribbles. At the center, Fair Financial Autonomy and Integrity Resource. We had just filed our paperwork that morning. Our first case. A woman named Kathleen, 58, working part-time at a bookstore while supporting her adult son and his wife, who hadn't worked in 3 years. They controlled her debit card. She didn't even know her login password. Denise was heading our outreach. Ethan was handling compliance and bookkeeping. I would take the lead on advocacy and legal coaching. "I want to build a blueprint," I said aloud, even though no one else was in the room. For the ones too scared to say no. For the ones who believe saying no means they're bad daughters or bad mothers or bad wives. I paused, looking at a photo of myself from a year ago, smiling at Sarah's housewarming party, not knowing it was funded with my forged signature. I didn't look like me then. I do now. At dusk, as the sky turned lilac and quiet spread again, my phone pinged. Unknown number. Text only. Asterisk, "Hey, Rachel. I think I have something you'll want to see. It's about your father." Asterisk. My stomach turned. My father had been gone since I was 9. No calls, no letters, just gone. I didn't even realize I still had questions left. But apparently I did. The message sat in my inbox for an hour before I dared to open it. I had just finished making coffee. My new habit was to take it black. No cream, no sugar, bitter, honest, like truth. Ethan had stepped out to walk the dog, and the house was unusually quiet. I clicked the file. It was a scanned letter, handwritten, dated 8 years ago. My father's name signed at the bottom. The letter wasn't long, but every line felt like a sledgehammer wrapped in silk. He had written it after one final argument with Margaret, after watching her manipulate a distant cousin into signing away his inheritance, after catching her lying about bills that never existed. And what cracked something deep in me, after learning she was coaching Sarah on how to emotionally exploit people who cared too much. Asterisk, I tried. Rachel. I tried to love her, but love without boundaries is martyrdom. And I won't let her turn you into a saint who dies saving sinners. Asterisk. He wrote that he left the marriage not just to escape Margaret, but to give me a chance to grow up without believing love and guilt were the same thing. I leaned back in my chair and cried without shame. Not for him, not even for me, but for the girl I had been, the one who waited every birthday for a call that never came. The one who thought maybe he didn't care. He did. 6 weeks passed. Margaret took a plea deal. She avoided jail, but her public image was wrecked. She was dropped from every board she once chaired, forced to pay restitution and write an apology letter. It wasn't heartfelt, but I kept it anyway. Proof, not of remorse, but of acknowledgement. Nathan lost his law license and was now being audited by the IRS. His fake financial charity was exposed in a local exposé titled The Guilt Economy. Sarah moved, left Seattle quietly. No apology, no note. But for the first time in my life, she had no access to my money, my name, or my presence. I didn't celebrate, but I did breathe. Fair Financial Autonomy and Integrity Resource got its first grant last week. A mid-sized foundation in Portland offered enough to fund legal aid for 5 women. One of them, a 63-year-old mother whose adult son stole her pension checks, was coming in for her first consult today. I straightened up the folders in our modest office space. Ethan hung a new sign by the front desk, and Denise walked in with a box of donated phones. Some of these ladies are being tracked by their kids. We'll get them clean numbers, she said. I nodded. This work isn't glamorous, I murmured. She smiled. But it's yours now. All of it. That night, after closing shop, I drove to a small park by the marina. The sun had dipped low but hadn't quite disappeared. I found the bench facing the water, the one Dad used to take me to when I was 5, before the storm between him and Mom split the sky for good. I sat, pulled my coat tighter, and let my thoughts drift. Not to what I'd lost, but to what I'd reclaimed. I remembered buying my first car with cash. The first time I won a pro bono case and watched a single mother hug her son, safe from eviction. I thought about the first time Ethan kissed my temple and told me I wasn't hard. I was steel shaped by fire. I was never just a support system, I whispered aloud. I was always the structure. The breeze picked up. The city lights shimmered on the water. I stood, feeling taller than I had in years. The next morning we met our new client. She had soft hands, a guarded smile, and a folder of horror. Her story felt too familiar. But this time I wasn't just surviving it. I was on the other side of it. As we ended the intake session, Ethan gently took my hand. You good? He asked. I nodded. Some wounds don't heal perfectly, but they make room for strength where fear used to live. Sometimes the people who raise us teach us more about survival than love. But surviving isn't the same as living. Rachel's story reminds us that family should be a source of strength, not silent suffering. Have you ever had to walk away from someone who kept taking more than they gave, just because they were family? Share your thoughts below. Your experience might help someone else finally feel seen. And if stories like this resonate with you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful real-life narratives that speak to the heart.